Good afternoon and welcome to the Introducing Microsoft Teams webinar delivered by Phoenix and our strategic partner Purify. Phoenix and Purify deliver Microsoft services to the majority of the UK public sector, and we thought we'd put on today's webinar really to cover the core concept of Teams, which is Microsoft's fastest growing application of all time, give you a short demonstration on some of the capability and help you understand how you can take the next step if you feel like any of the content that we covered today is relevant to you. What Phoenix and Purify have really noticed is a range of public sector organisations utilising the functionality of Teams, whether you're a housing association, NHS Trust, a local gov customer, charity, etc., really to maximise the collaboration tools that are available within Office 365 and also take advantage of the licensing that you've invested in. Some of the concepts we'll talk about today are both technical but also focused on the end user and some of the adoption challenges that we've seen organisations face and how to address them. And we're also going to, as we go through today's presentation, launch a short poll very shortly, and we will just try and understand where you are in your specific journey to Microsoft Teams so we can understand what the most relevant next step may be for you. So I will hand over to Dave Pryor-Jones from Purify to take us through the first section of the content and the poll.
Thanks, Craig. So, as Craig mentioned, we're going to launch a poll. I'm going to give you the options first, and then hopefully the poll will appear. Just wanted to get a bit of a view on your experience with Microsoft Teams. So there are 4 options. First one being, I know nothing. The second option being, what's up with Skype for Business? We've got Skype for Business in play, or we know what that is. What's the point in moving to Teams? Third option is, I've tried it and it didn't work, or I've looked at it. And the fourth option is I'm all in, Teams is awesome, just tell me how to do it. So hopefully we should be distributing the poll. Oh, look at this, live results, technology.
It's like Who Wants to Be a Millionaire.
Looks great. So we've got a lot at the moment, 35% of people, what's up with Skype for Business? A couple of people who've tried it. Oh, a third of people, I'm all in at the moment. And a few people are prepared to admit they know nothing, which is always a good place to start. So that's great. Thank you for that. Appreciate your responses. So we can tailor a bit of the presentation towards that. So I'll do a little bit more on the difference between Skype for Business and Teams, perhaps, judging on your feedback. So what exactly is Microsoft Teams? It's based around 4 areas. So chat, collaboration, extensibility and customization, and then security. So we'll run through these fairly quickly and then we'll get to the live demo, which I know we are itching to show you, and I'm sure you're more interested to see than a bunch of slides, but it is useful to go through these in advance. So the biggest thing, I suppose, is to communicate through chat. So this is obviously with Skype for Business, you've been able to chat and use instant messaging with Skype for some time. The biggest difference between that and Teams is that Teams provides this threaded, persistent and contextual chat. So what we mean by that is that if you've ever had an experience of chatting in Skype for Business, once you close your Skype for Business chat window, that chat is essentially lost to you as a user. You can recover it, it does exist in Exchange, but it's not obvious to see it. Whereas the chat within Teams is much more like WhatsApp, I suppose, in that you can have group chats, you can have individual chats, you can rename your group chats, but also you've got the chat history there. So as I say, it's threaded, persistent and contextual. You've also got this private chat for one-to-one or group conversations, but the idea being that you can share information in a very quick and open way. We'll come on to some areas where this makes a difference in the future, but we find that instant chat tends to be a lot more relaxed as a form of communication. So one of the big things around this is Microsoft's view of humanizing the workplace with GIFs, stickers and emojis. And whilst if you're anything like me, that makes you cringe a little inside, there is a good reason for it. And one of the good examples that I've found is just the ability to put an emoji after a slightly sarcastic sentence, like a winking emoji, could mean the difference between sitting in a meeting with HR or not. So it does add an extra level of context, which I think is useful. The next part is to collaborate. So this is the main part. When people talk about Teams, they're mostly thinking about collaboration, I think, which is the section which has actually got the Teams section within Teams, if you like. So each team is a group of people who collaborate together across a set of documents. files and tools, and each team has a bunch of channels where you can subdivide those teams into individual subject headings, if you like. The big thing here is being able to share and co-author Office apps, which we'll show you as a live demo shortly. The other really nice thing about it is that you can, for each team, you can set up shared resources that you're going to use all the time. So you can use, there's a tab at the top where you can add more functionality. So you could add OneNote, you could add Power BI or Planner. You can also add all sorts of third-party external sources to these teams as well. So that can be really, really useful. The idea being that Microsoft's play with Teams is that Teams will be the place where the vast majority of knowledge workers spend all of their time. We're trying to get people out of Outlook for their day-to-day business and into Teams. So because of a whole load of reasons, really, in terms of increased productivity. The final thing is there's email integration as well to keep the whole team in the loop. So if you don't happen to respond to a Teams message, you will get hounded via email to get in there. That's also interesting, is that each team has its own dedicated email address, which is set up as part of that team. So for example, if you had a GDPR email address, that GDPR email address could be forwarded directly into a team. All the team are notified when that email comes in. It comes in with its natural email formatting. You could then collaborate on a response and then work that through and then email that response out. And you've got all that kind of history there as well, instead of it being in a bunch of people's Outlook folders. So that's collaborate. Customize. This is about moving teams into more of a kind of business process tool. So Teams, if Teams is the application that the vast majority of workers spend most of their time in, then this is the application where we want to surface data. So you can do that through bots and connectors. You can build integrations to your existing processes, and there's a whole third-party app store in here as well. So there are connectors to all sorts of different applications. So as an example, you could have an accounting package, and instead of needing to launch the accounting package, you could use the bot to ask the accounting package, how much money have I got left on cost center 3201, and it will come back and tell you how much money you've got left in that financial period, which is much better than having to do a number of clicks through your accounting package. So that's the kind of thing that we're looking at in terms of customizing and extending Teams. Final one is working with confidence. So get built-in security, compliance, and manageability from Office 365. If you're already in 365, then obviously all of the Teams functionality sits within 365 and is dependent on your existing security settings. You've got built-in information protection, e-discovery and audit, multi-factor authentication, secure guest access. There's also data residency, so depending on where your tenancy has been set up, you can ensure that all of your data stays in the same location. So that's all about being part of the Microsoft's global hyperscale cloud. The other interesting thing about Teams I just wanted to cover off is around what Microsoft call first-line workers. So these are people who work for your organization but don't necessarily have a full kind of domain joined device. So in retail, it could be people who work on the shop floor. In local gov could be operatives, so people who are refuse collection, or all kinds of people who work for you as an organization but probably deal with you via email on their phone. They will have Teams licensing. It's included as part of 365 licensing. In fact, there is a special first-line worker license, which we can talk to you more about, or Phoenix can certainly. But the nice thing about it is that the Teams application on iOS or Android is very full-featured. It can do most of the same things, and that enables you to communicate effectively with your team who are out and about, who are traditionally quite hard to reach. So they get access to all the all the documents, they get access to their group chat and web conferencing and things. You can also celebrate your team with praise, which again for me as a bit of a cynic is a really American thing. And one of my colleagues loves to send me a unicorn every time she thinks that I've done something good, but probably because she knows that it annoys me greatly. But I think there is a real benefit in praise, in that in the future I foresee that they will be you'll be able to customize what those kind of praise stickers look like, in which case it could be linked into something that's a bit more meaningful within an organization. It's also very popular amongst some of our education clients as well. They use it a lot. Final thing on first line workers is that there's also a shift management tool within Teams, so you can create and review schedules and shifts. Your first line workers can change shifts with each other without any management being involved, and you can integrate your workforce management system with it as well. So if you have things like Workday or other HR systems, you can integrate those into Teams and use shift management within Teams as well, which is quite cool. One of the questions we often get asked about teamwork in Microsoft 365 is, what about Yammer? What about Outlook? Does Teams replace email? So this slide is quite useful in that this is Microsoft's view of the kind of teamwork world. Teams is useful for your inner loop, people that you work with regularly, you collaborate with, and that could be inside or outside your organization. So for example, if you worked in marketing, you may well work with an external agency, you're working all the time on projects, but you work for different companies, then Teams allows you to work collaboratively together regardless of which organization you belong to, and to share data in a very meaningful way. Email will always exist, and Outlook is still a great tool. So email will always exist for kind of ubiquitous targeted communications. Most people manage their diary in Outlook, but you can now see your calendar in Teams as well, which is really useful. And finally, Yammer is still very much in the mix for teamwork within Microsoft. There's still a lot of development going on into Yammer, but generally we tend to find that Yammer works best for larger organizations. A large construction organization that I worked with a little while ago, they used Yammer very effectively, where they had pockets of knowledge all around the world that were difficult to access. So you could kind of find out somebody who knew something that was relevant to you, even though they worked in Singapore and you worked in London, and you would never normally cross paths. So Yammer can be great for that kind of informing and engaging employees in a larger organization. Teams can be used for that as well, depending on your organization size. We're also seeing a lot of customers investigating using Teams for kind of intranet style, traditional intranet style services, but obviously underpinning Teams is SharePoint as well, and Stream for video content. So it does all hang together. It's a bit horses for courses, and depending on the size of your organization and what you're looking to do, depends on which world you'll live in most. But we're seeing that a lot of people are spending a lot of time in Teams. The next thing that I'd like to talk to you a bit about is calls and meetings. So it's one of the first things that our customers tend to use once they've started to use Teams, is initial kind of instant chat and then calling a meeting. The calling and meeting experience is great within Teams. So this slide shows you kind of Microsoft's desire to improve meetings, which I think we can probably all agree would be a good thing. So it's before, during, and after. So before, when you set up a Teams meeting, it exists, although it has a time slot, it also exists kind of beyond time, and you can always go back to it in your calendar. So before the meeting, you can put in meeting insights, history, you can put in notes, documents, files, all that kind of stuff, and it will all be there all the time. So you can always just roll back to a meeting and find out what was discussed or what was briefed. During the meeting, everybody being connected, whether that's via 4G on your phone and running video over phones over 4G works really well. The connectivity is kind of pretty bomb-proof with Teams meetings at the moment, which is great. And then after the meetings, because within a meeting, you can have live translate, you can have live transcribe as well, so you can get a set of notes basically out of your meeting at the end. What's coming soon, we believe, is that action items will be automatically captured from meetings. So the artificial intelligence will run through the automatically generated transcription of the meeting and pull out action items, which hopefully then it will be able to do something intelligent with, like pop into your to-do list in your desktop. So that's a bit about meetings. We're big proponents of video first at Purify. We think that adding video into initial meetings works really, really well. It's great for remote attendees. It really makes you feel engaged and in part of the meeting. One of the reasons that people are hesitant to do that is because they might not want you to see what's going on behind them, or you might have sensitive client information on a whiteboard on a wall behind you in a meeting room. So Teams enables you to blur your background, which feels like when you first see it, you think it's a bit of a noddy feature, or maybe not that useful, but it does have a really good business case. The thing that's coming next is the ability to customize your background, so you'll be able to change it. And that's what this GIF is showing you. So we're expecting that to come fairly soon. And then this is just a quick demo of live captions. So if you've got people in areas that are particularly noisy, or they don't have any headphones, then you could turn live captions on and you could read what was being said. You can also translate those captions as well live in a meeting. So it's great for a kind of global workforce. As well as kind of using doing meetings via Teams, you can also use Microsoft Teams Rooms, which are certified pieces of hardware. They're from a number of vendors, but they're certified by Microsoft to give the same user experience regardless of what vendor hardware you buy. So these are designed for kind of your conference rooms or huddle spaces. different size rooms available, but it just makes video conferencing work really, really well. There's a whole load of really interesting functionality like proximity-based meeting join, which we can talk to you about another time, but they are fantastic pieces of kit, including just launched content cameras. So what's happening in this slide is a demo of a regular dry whiteboard being written on by somebody. You can see the remote attendees experience in the bottom right-hand corner of that. The artificial intelligence is basically making the human transparent, so you can always read what's on the board. But what you can't tell from this slide is that also this analog written content is being digitized in the Microsoft Whiteboard app as well. So you no longer need to do a whiteboard session and take a picture of it on your phone. It's all captured and you can replay all of the interaction as well, which is quite smart. Final thing is that you can use Teams to completely replace your phone system if you want to as well. So we've got full PSTN calling, so you can call out via Teams. There are Teams certified handsets, also contact center. There are a bunch of contact center plugins that are available to do more intelligent call routing and things on top of the Teams, so to overlay over the top of Teams, which again, if that's something that's interesting to you, we can talk about. But it's this whole kind of solution is really useful from a kind of, the calling piece makes a big difference because we've got one app that can do regular calling, can also do collaboration, instant messaging, meetings. It's all in the one interface. The final piece, which I'm not sure if everybody knows, is that Teams actually does live events. So although we're using GoToMeeting today, we could have done this in Teams. So Teams live events is for webinars and meeting streaming and that kind of thing. It's fairly straightforward to use. You can use it either in a simple mode where you have a producer, where you nominate a producer and you nominate somebody to speak, or you can do it with, if you had a large event going on with an AV production company, you can take a feed from them and move it through. So live events is included. The other great thing about Teams is that the Teams licensing is the same for everybody. If you have 365, you have Teams. There's no Teams Pro. There's no different versions of licensing. One license gets you all of this content. So without further ado, cool. I'll hand you over to Craig to give you a bit more of a live demo.
Great stuff. Thanks, Dave. That was really helpful to set the scene. Unfortunately, on the medium of a webinar, we can't offer live whiteboarding and all the rest of it and show some of the cool features, but we would, again, welcome the opportunity to come and show you that in person if possible. So the first thing I wanted to explore as part of the demonstration is actually how chat works and some of the features that are available within. As you'll be able to see from the screen, my colleague Natasha, she is French in this scenario. And one of the really good features about Teams now is we can actually translate non-English language into English at a click of a button. So here I'm going to hit translate, and little by little the bird makes its nest. This is a very cryptic, perhaps a French proverb that Natasha has sent to me, but you can imagine how this could be used in your organization. Again, if you don't have English language speakers there, and we can translate, and we could also use this in an education setting where perhaps you have students where English isn't their first language. So this is not just French; there's a number of other languages, but we can actually translate text within chat. The other part of the M365 suite that we always talk about is accessibility, and those features are now being embedded into Teams. So from within even this chat or within Teams itself, we can access the immersive reader functionality. So we can adjust the screen color, we can increase line spacing, and we can start to translate words as well. So really trying to create that inclusive working environment and deal with people with either hidden or visible accessibility needs. Those tools are built into Teams itself. Another feature that's just been rolled out into Teams, and maybe of particular interest if you're an NHS trust or perhaps a housing association with frontline workers who may be potentially vulnerable, what we can actually do is send messages now. Some can be standard and it will be sent as usual, but we can also categorize that message. So we can make it an important message, or we can make that an urgent message. So think about this as being potentially a replacement for a paging system. If I send this as an urgent message, then the recipient will be pinged every 2 minutes until they respond. So a really nice feature from a chat point of view, which we're seeing a number of organizations looking at now. I'll mark this as important and say, hi, Natasha. Can we work on a document together? And hopefully the answer will be yes. So she will be notified here. You can see it's been highlighted with the red exclamation mark. And what I'm going to do is share a file from my OneDrive. And that will come up as a link. So we're not sharing an email and attachment. We're going to do this live. So I'll send that to Natasha now. She's online. That's good. She's there. We'll give that a smiley face and an emoji, just because I'm so relieved in the live demonstration. We then click on the presentation itself. What I will be able to do is actually edit that directly in Teams. So I don't have to leave the application itself. I can open up this PowerPoint presentation, and as soon as Natasha's into that document, we'll be able to see where she is editing as well. Let's give that a second to come through. As we wait. So you can see how this is very useful, because as a user, I've not had to leave the Teams GUI, and we can actually edit the document without leaving it. And now I can see that Natasha is also editing that. I can see where she's editing the document and what changes she's making in real time. So again, this feature being extensively used now is a way of cutting down on the time it takes really to edit and modify and share documents. Because this is shared on my OneDrive, has all the appropriate security permissions, when I close this down, it will simply save the changes back to my OneDrive, and we can move on. So something very simple there, just in terms of co-authoring a document. We can, of course, co-author Word files, Excel, and PowerPoint as well. So that is, this was the chat. Now, what we can do from here, and we won't do it today because it'll probably cause lots of interference, and Dave showed some of the video functionality before, but from this position, we can actually start a video call. We can start an audio call, or if I wanted to, I can actually share my desktop as well. So this is something that organizations are used to doing with Skype for Business just now, and all of that functionality, all those features have been sort of replicated within Teams. The other thing which is quite useful is if I wanted to add, I can bring more people into this chat. So if I wanted to bring in some colleagues or people outside the organization, that is also perfectly acceptable too. And it is worth highlighting that, yes, you can use Teams within your own organization, but you can also have external guests from other, perhaps, organizations that you work with or partners collaborating in this way. What I find really useful as well, which is a slight enhancement to sort of the Skype for Business online chat, is we get these tabs at the top by default. So between Natasha and I can see what files we've been commonly working on. I can see an organization chart as to where my sort of colleagues are in the organization, and I can see the latest activity. This I find is really useful because I don't have to go back and search for a document that I was working on or where I've shared it. It will simply show up in the files that I've been collaborating on with Natasha. So that is the chat area, and we'll now move on to Teams itself. So as you can see at Phoenix, we have a number of teams. Now, general best practice here is try to be part of a smaller number of teams with more channels within them. And there's some really useful things that we can do to try and target communication within teams. So this is the persistent chat window that Dave referred to earlier. We're currently in just the general channel within our demo environment. And I can immediately see that before I start typing, 8 people will see my message. And if somebody's out of an office, for example, it will tell me that. But what I can do is I can actually at the entire team if I wanted to push out a notification to people that I'm communicating to the team as a whole, or I can actually highlight individual users as well with my chat. So I'll post that out. And the other thing I can do now within Teams is create a new conversation, but I can also make this an announcement. So for example, we've seen organizations using this as almost like a lightweight intranet to push out an announcement, perhaps about a new starter in the organization or a new policy that's been released. You don't have to do that simply as a normal chat. You can actually do it as an announcement. Now, another feature that's come in recently is we can moderate this message as well. So as the poster of this message, I can basically set who can reply. In this instance, it's me and only the moderators of this team who can respond. So this could be a new policy announced, and we can make this look more visually appealing by putting in pictures. Please read, and then we can actually call out some named individuals as well and send out. So you can see how we can start to target the communication, have different styles of communication within the team itself. And if we wanted to, from this position, say we wanted to run an ad hoc call rather than schedule a call as a group, if I hit meet now, that will actually then ping out to everyone. I won't actually hit this button because it will probably cause mass chaos. But again, we could just have, quick catch up, hit meet now, and everyone will be invited to join this video call. The great thing about that, it will also contact people if they're on their mobile devices or if they are at their desktop. So really bringing together everyone in one place. So Dave mentioned it earlier how we can customize the team itself with tabs. And from the top here, I just wanted to show you some brief examples of how that can be done. For example, we can embed things like forms into our team. And in this example here, we have got a form that we can look at, or we can actually embed websites into this. So for example, here's one of our public sector customers. Just as an example, we can embed web pages into this team as a tab. So highly customizable. We can make this suitable or appropriate for whatever the team's usage. Perhaps if you're Dynamics 365 customers, you can embed that. If you're already using Yammer, for example, you can embed the Yammer feed into Teams. The idea about this is that you can integrate to as many Microsoft, but also non-Microsoft applications as possible to make that team highly relevant to what those users need to do on a day-to-day basis. There is a collection of other applications. They need to be appropriately licensed for these, but we have seen certainly education customers taking advantage of things like Schooler or Flipgrid, some of those ISV solutions that were available where you can now integrate directly into Teams as well. So I would encourage you just to have a look through the applications that are available, see if there's any that you're currently using that you could integrate into Teams itself. Another example, and Dave talked a little bit about Stream. So Stream has a number of different uses. So if we were to run a video call and record it, the content would be automatically recorded and posted into the Stream's channel. We can also embed Stream video into a team. And the good thing about Teams is by using Stream, it will automatically transcribe the content, and that will become searchable, and we can actually access that both from an accessibility point of view and also pick up people's faces to make that content more accessible. So lots of options there in terms of embedding different Office 365 apps and really making this as customizable as possible. I won't go into the calendar because it's my own personal calendar, but again, that Dave mentioned that integration is there to your Outlook. We can run calls from here as well if we wanted to, and I can see how I've got a range of people on speed dial and contacts, what files that I am working on. So all within one interface. As a knowledge worker, I really have access to everything that I need to do. What Microsoft have also done here, they've started to put some commonly used apps or apps that they may think you'll find useful, such as Planner or Shifts in Stream. Perhaps the WhoBot, for example, really highlighted here as being apps that you may want to use on a day-to-day basis. So that's a very brief overview of the Teams application itself. There's so much more to explore, and what we typically do is run through this with you in your own environment and really so as understand how the business could use this as a tool. So I will pan back to Dave, and we will come back to the next steps shortly.
Thanks, Craig. So I think the next thing that we were going to talk to you is just give you a few real world examples of some of our clients that we work with in a partnership together to show kind of what's actually going in the kind of real world scenario. So First one of these is City College Peterborough. We've done some great work with them recently. They've got a big focus on accessibility, not just with technology, but just as an organisation. They deal with all kinds of different people with different skill sets, and they're very inclusive as an organisation. So they were kind of, when we started working with them, they were already interested in using the native Windows 10 ease of access settings and the accessibility checker in their documents. So now every document that gets issued by the organisation goes through the accessibility checker. If you haven't seen it, have a look at it. It's available in all the Windows, in all the Office apps, and it just shows if content that you're producing is going to be accessible to people or not. They're also using dictation and subtitles within Word and starting to use Immersive Reader, and they're really interested in using Immersive Reader within Teams. So this, Craig highlighted it to you, but the ability to have these words read to you if you have difficulty reading them is really interesting. The other really interesting thing about them, they started a kind of champions program. So they worked with a number of lecturers who are interested in using Teams. Teams for Education is a really interesting product. It's almost like a kind of sub-product part of Teams. There's some functionality that comes in Teams for Education that doesn't exist in other places. So if you're on an education tenancy, we'd love to come and talk to you about all the different things that you can do. There's Turnitin integration, so for kind of anti-plagiarism. There's also assessments that you can set directly within Teams and collate the responses. But they had this champions program with some lecturers who were interested, and we did some intensive work with them. But they also rewarded those champions who took some of their own time with a Surface Pro at the end of that. So it was a good incentive, and they didn't know that was coming. So it wasn't that they just signed up to get a Surface Pro. It just kind of happened as a result. And when we come on to talk about adoption and change management, I think it's interesting to talk through what do people get in order, you know, if they're giving up their time to learn a new product, do they get something back out? So that's an education one. This second one's a housing. We're working with a housing association at the moment, so it's a live product, a live project, sorry, and we're looking at using the app with their first line workers, so their operatives who are out, their maintenance operatives going out maintaining housing stock. So by using the app, they have access to important documents on the go. They can use forms to fill in for conditional surveys, that kind of thing. Quite interestingly, they're using the camera within the app to record issues with housing stock. The great thing about the smart camera, about using the camera directly from within the Teams app, is that that picture is never stored on that device. It's only stored within the tenancy. So for example, if you had somebody using their own phone, but they were logged into Teams and they took a picture, there's no risk within that housing stock of capturing any family information in the background or anything like that on their own personal device. So it keeps everybody safe. The other thing that's nice is video calling as well. So using video calling for team knowledge sharing, they've got a couple of guys who are really, really good at fixing complex boiler or heating problems, but they're always in demand driving around the place. Whereas they've got regular maintenance guys who could just have a quick video call and say, what do I need to do to top up the pressure in this? Or how do I do that? You have a quick video call and that saves somebody driving an hour, 2 hours across Kent to solve a problem. So quite interesting. And then the last one is a local government customer that are exploring the use of kind of digital citizenship. So using live events for public consultation, so whether that be planning or doing like Ask Me Anything sessions for local councillors, making their councillors more available. I don't know if you guys know, but a lot of the time if there are public consultation events, they tend to be in village halls between like 2 o'clock and 4 o'clock. It's not really targeting the demographic that they're wanting to target. So by using live events that are then recorded via stream, they can then those videos can then be linked to social media platforms. So you can either attend live or you can watch it on demand. The other great thing about Stream that we haven't mentioned is that you can embed forms and quiz questions mid-video. So another example of this is